On the afternoon of August 20th, 1966, the bodies of two men were discovered on Vintém Hill in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Both men were dressed in formal suits, wearing strange eye masks made of lead and covered with waterproof coats. Many believe the men were attempting to contact aliens or spiritual beings using psychedelic drugs, and that the lead masks were meant to protect their eyes from an intense, blinding light during the encounter. But another chilling theory suggests something far darker, that the men may have been deceived by a third party who exploited their obsession with spirits and extraterrestrials, lured them to the hill, and instructed them to wear the masks so he could steal the large sum of money they were carrying. In today's video, I'll take you through the mysterious events and interesting facts that surrounds this mysterious case. By the way, I'm Vestige, and I research the world's most disturbing mysteries and unexplained events. The men were later identified as Manuel Pereira de Cruz and Miguel Jose Viano. They were not drifters or strangers to weird science. They were trained electronics technicians from Campos dos Goitacazes, Brazil. Their daily work involved radio equipment, batteries, and electrical repairs, jobs that required careful handling of metals, solvents, and industrial chemicals. But behind their ordinary professions, they shared a secret obsession. They believed they could communicate with beings from another world, or perhaps another dimension. Friends later revealed that the two men were deeply interested in spiritualism and extraterrestrial contact. This obsession would allegedly lead them to Vintém Hill and to their deaths. When their bodies were discovered, the scene looked strangely peaceful. They were dressed in neat, formal suits and waterproof coats, as if waiting for an important business meeting. But it was what covered their faces that transformed a simple discovery into a legendary mystery. Over their eyes were two crudely fashioned masks, made of heavy lead. These lead masks remain the most iconic and unsettling evidence in the entire case. They were not professional safety equipment. They were hand-cut goggles, roughly shaped from sheets of lead, in what was likely their own workshop back in Campos. There were no eye holes. The masks were not meant to help them see the visitors. They were meant to protect them from something. As trained electronics technicians, Manuel and Miguel had a practical understanding of physics and radiation. Their choice of lead suggests a very specific fear. In the 1960s, lead was the primary shield against X-rays and gamma radiation. By wearing these masks, the men showed they were not only spiritual seekers, they were preparing for a physical, high-energy event. They believed the entities or craft they hoped to encounter would arrive with a brilliance so intense it could burn their eyes or liquefy their retinas. This is the great paradox of the case. The very tools they built to survive the encounter became the most chilling symbols of their fate. Did the masks protect them? Or were they proof that something went terribly wrong? We will never know. When the bodies were discovered, police found a small, water-damaged notebook in one of the men's pockets. Inside were cryptic handwritten instructions. The handwriting was steady and deliberate, suggesting calm, not panic. It did not read like a suicide note or a cry for help. Instead, it looked like a checklist, a mission plan for a final encounter with something not of this world. The notebook contained only one short set of instructions. 1630 at the agreed place. 1830 swallow the capsules. After effect, protect metals. Wait for mask signal. This notebook is the clearest window into the strange, scientific spiritualist mindset of the two men. The instruction to swallow the capsules suggests they were using some kind of chemical catalyst, possibly psychedelics or toxic substances, to alter their state of consciousness. Many believe the pills were meant to change the way their minds worked, allowing them to tune in to another frequency, much like a radio. In their belief system, chemistry and spirituality were not opposites. They were tools working together. But the most disturbing line was the last one. Wait for mask signal. What signal? The men believed that when the beings arrived, they would be accompanied by a light so powerful it could permanently damage their eyes. The notebook did not tell them to put on the masks immediately. It told them to wait. Only when the signal appeared were they supposed to cover their eyes. Police later confirmed something even stranger. The rest of the notebook was completely blank. It ends there. No explanation. No follow-up instructions. No final message. This raises haunting questions. Why did it stop so suddenly? Did they plan to write more after the encounter? Was the notebook meant to record what happened next? The empty pages feel like a story cut off before the most important chapter could be written. And the notebook suggests something even more unsettling. There may have been a third person involved. Someone had clearly given them precise instructions. What time to arrive, when to swallow the pills, and when to wait for the signal. This was not random behavior. It was organized. So the final question remains. Who wrote these instructions? And what exactly were Manuel and Miguel waiting for? While the public focused on aliens and lead masks, the police focused on something far more human. The money. On August 17th, Manuel and Miguel did not tell their families they were going to Vintém Hill. They said they were traveling to buy work supplies. Before leaving, the two men gathered a large sum of cash, nearly 3 million cruzeros. In the 1960s, this was a small fortune. They boarded a bus carrying that money. It was never seen again. We know the men made at least one stop along the way. They entered a local shop and purchased waterproof coats and a bottle of water. The clerk later described something unsettling. Miguel had appeared extremely nervous, repeatedly checking his watch. They were following a strict schedule. A deadline was approaching. When their bodies were finally discovered on the hill, police searched their pockets expecting to find a thick bundle of cash. There was nothing. Not a single bill remained. This missing money shifted the case from strange to suspicious. Investigators soon turned their attention to a man named Elcio Gomez, a close friend of the two technicians who shared their obsession with spiritual communication. He had participated in earlier experiments with them, rituals that allegedly involved explosions and secret meetings. Police began to question everything. Was the ritual real? Or was it a trap? Had Manuel and Miguel been lured to the hill under the promise of meeting extraterrestrial beings, only to be robbed? Authorities arrested Elcio Gomez, convinced he had played a role. They suspected he may have provided the capsules mentioned in the notebook, possibly poisoned or strong enough to incapacitate the men while the money was taken. But there was one fatal problem. There was no proof. The investigation moved slowly. The money was never recovered. No witnesses could confirm what happened on the hill. With no solid evidence, police were forced to release Elcio Gomez. He walked free, and with him vanished the only concrete lead in the case. The 3 million cruzeros were never found. Whether they were stolen or used in a ritual that went terribly wrong remains unknown. The mystery of the missing money died with the men who carried it. Even though the police were looking for a thief, the people living near Vintém Hill had a different opinion about what happened that day. A local woman named Gracinda Barbosa, who was driving past the hill with her children that night, claimed she saw something that looked out of this world. She described seeing a giant, glowing object shaped like an orange egg hovering directly over the top of the hill. It wasn't moving like a plane. It was just sitting there, glowing so bright that it lit up the trees around the spot where Manuel and Miguel were lying. Gracinda said she watched it for several minutes. She said the object seemed to be pulsing with light. Then, as if it had found what it was looking for, it zipped away toward the ocean and disappeared into the clouds. This is where the story gets truly creepy. Remember the instructions on the notebook telling the men to wait for the masked signal. If Gracinda saw that light at the same time the men were on the hill, it means they weren't just crazy repairmen waiting for nothing. We have evidence to believe the two men might have been onto something. Was the light an alien ship coming to meet them? Or was it something much more dangerous, maybe a burst of energy that their handmade masks simply couldn't block? The greatest tragedy of the lead mask case is not only the deaths of two men. It is that the case could have been solved. The key to the entire mystery lay in one word from the notebook: capsules. If police had properly tested the men's bodies, they might have discovered exactly what those pills contained. Were they poisoned by a killer? Were they powerful drugs meant to help them see another world? Or were they something else entirely? We will never know, because the investigation collapsed under its own mistakes. When the bodies were found on Vintém Hill, they had already been exposed to the hot, humid Brazilian sun for 4 days. By the time an autopsy was performed, decomposition had already begun. The examination only deepened the mystery. There were no signs of violence, no wounds, no clear cause of death. But toxicology, the one test that mattered most, was never properly completed. At the time, the state medical examiner's office was overwhelmed and severely underfunded. When the coroner finally attempted chemical analysis, the internal organs were already too deteriorated to test for toxins or drugs. And then came the most unforgivable failure. The first doctor who examined the bodies did not even request a toxicology report. Only later, when higher authorities realized how strange the case truly was, did they order a full investigation. By then, it was too late. The evidence had literally rotted away. Because of this negligence, the lead mask's case shifted from a solvable crime into an eternal mystery. Without toxicology results, we cannot prove that Elcio Gomez poisoned them. We cannot prove they died from a reaction to the signal. We cannot even prove what they swallowed. All that remains are two handmade lead masks and a soggy notebook filled with rules for a meeting that may never have happened. Today, those masks rest in the Museum of the Civil Police. They are cold, gray, silent, perfectly guarding the secrets of what Manuel and Miguel truly saw. Before the lights went out, the lead masks of Vintém Hill remain one of the most chilling what-if stories in history. But now, the evidence is in your hands. We've looked at the technical background of these men, the cryptic ritual notebook, the missing fortune of 3 million cruzeros, and that glowing orange egg in the sky. Some say this was a cold-blooded robbery planned by a friend. Others believe it was a scientific experiment that actually worked, but came with deadly consequences. I want to hear from you. Based on the evidence we've covered, what do you think happened to Manuel and Miguel? Write your theory in the comments below. I read every single one of them. If you want to dive deeper into the mysteries that history tried to bury, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications.